Hey everyone, Joshua Gibson here, and you're listening to episode 39 of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. Before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to the show's sponsor, BarShield. BarShield created a maintenance kit designed to prevent rust and restore spin to a barbell sleeves. The kit comes with a nylon brush, an 8-ounce bottle of anti-rust, anti-wear lubricant, and 3 microfiber towels. It also comes with a simple set of instructions which will have you well on your way to perfectly spinning beautiful bars. My discount code PWPodcast will get you 10% off of your entire purchase. It will also help me to continue producing great podcasts with amazing guests. Head over to barshieldUSA.com, pick up a kit, and get your bars looking and spinning like new. That's it for the intro. Now let's get on to this week's podcast. And we are live. This is Joshua Gibson with the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast, and I want to thank you again for joining me for another episode. This time I'm joined by Taylor Mendes. Some of you may be familiar with her from the old Average Bros training videos. I know that's where I've kind of was introduced to a lot of the lifters from Bros. So she's an American weightlifter in the 63 kilo class, a senior national medalist. Taylor, how are you doing?
I'm good. So
my first question, and this is kind of what drew my interest to bring you on, is how did you get into the sport of weightlifting?
I started doing CrossFit like most weightlifters today, and the CrossFit that I went to just happened to have John Broz come in once a week and teach the lifts. And, you know, John Broz being the like quiet, confident, imposing figure that he is, he was just very, he had a very like sincere conviction that I could be as strong as I wanted to be, which at the time was just a 200 pound back squat. And so when I told him I wanted to do that, he was like, oh, that's like easy stuff. And so, it just like happened that his gym was closer to where I was living than the CrossFit was. And so he kind of just pulled me in, and it didn't take long until I was hooked. I really liked that weightlifting is very, progress is very clear and objective, and success in your training day to day is very clear. And that was one thing I didn't like about CrossFit, is I didn't really know if I was getting better. So the simplicity of weightlifting just like won me over.
So do you have any like prior experience in other sports? Because sometimes I know if you see an athlete that maybe played football or played another sport who's really athletic, you can kind of see that and know they'll be a good weightlifter. So do you have any background in athletics?
No, not at all. I didn't play sports in school. I went through college. I was not active at all. And I would not call myself a natural athlete by any stretch of the imagination. If you just ask my husband, like anytime he asks me to do anything new, like if we're going to go play Topgolf or we're going to go bowling or you're going to throw a ball at me, I'm going to look coordinated, athletic. That's another reason that weightlifting was good for me. There's like, I need to learn how to snatch and I need to learn how to clean and jerk, and I don't have to do anything else.
So do you think when John looked at you from day one, do you think he was supremely confident because he saw what you were capable of? Or do you think he just thought, well, if I can help instill this confidence in her, she'll have the confidence in herself to push it as far as she can take it?
I think you'd have to ask John I don't know. I mean, I was not strong. When I met John, I was doing like, I don't know, 3960. Like I was not strong. My snatches, I didn't know how to snatch. I didn't really know how to clean. And I think like what John saw was just that I showed up every day. Mm-hmm. And I'm a very disciplined person. Like I graduated undergrad in 3 years. When I graduated with a job in federal law enforcement. I moved across the country by myself. I was just a very disciplined person. And if I said I was going to do something, I was going to see it through. And I think that's really what John saw, and then that's kind of like what snowballed into what it has.
Yeah, and looking at your numbers now, you were 39.60. Then what are your best lifts currently?
91, 112.
Okay, and like watching you lift, your mobility is like on point. It's very, very good. So is that something you kind of had from the start?
Yeah, I actually, like, for the longest time, I hated when people said there was anyone with genetic advantages in weightlifting, because I think that's like such bullshit and such a cop out argument. But I do think that I do have good genetics with mobility, because my dad is 60, never done a snatch in his life, and can get into like a perfect bottom position with a bar over his head. So I do think there's like, I got lucky.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'm kind of in that same boat where like I can catch a snatch and my ass is like an inch from the ground and everybody oohs and ahs over it, but I've not done anything really to develop it. I mean, I've snatched and cleaned and squatted and tried to go as full range of motion as possible, but it's something that just kind of comes along with you. So like as far as training goes, what's like the most difficult aspect of it for you?
Just mentally showing up every day. I think like you can physically going to the gym every day is super easy. Like anybody can do that, but actually showing up, like shutting the day off and actually trying every day is really, really hard. And I think that's why people can train for years and not really make any progress, because they're not doing that and they don't see the value in that. That's one thing that John Broz taught me, like from the start, and I'm going to steal this from him because I think it's perfect. He said, like, think about your day as you have like 100 units of focus for the day. And you're going to spend that 100 units doing all kinds of things. Like maybe you spend like 1 unit making breakfast and you spend this many units working or doing this and that. And like you need to save up as many of those units as you can for the gym. Like if you really want to make progress. And I'll preface this with saying, like I am talking about myself and my goals, which are like make a world team. Like this is not for like someone who's got a full job and kids and, you know, a full life. Like my life is very much focused on weightlifting. And so I've really made a point to like create a life in such a way that I can bring as many units of focus into the gym every day. And when you do that, it's really, really hard. I mean, it is not unusual for me when I'm in the midst of a really tough training cycle to get to like the Friday and Saturday, whatever day I end up totaling for that week. And just like once I finish clean and jerking, like just lay down and cry. Like not because I'm in pain or anything, but just because I'm like so tired. Because it takes so much out of you to try, like to really truly try as hard as you can every day when you go to the gym. And
I think it's important that you did preface that, because a lot of people, and I've noticed this, there's like this dichotomy. So a lot of people train like 3 to 5 days a week. And they kind of want to live the lifestyle of a weightlifter, but like unless you're training 10 plus sessions a week, like you don't need to focus that much on your recovery because you have so much downtime. It's just, and we were talking about this off air, but it's just so much different when you train in the morning, you train in the afternoon, and then you have maybe like a 10-hour turnaround before your next session or like a 12-hour turnaround, rather than having like 2 days off. So 48 hours of complete downtime. So what was your training like when you first started with Broz, and how has it kind of evolved? Because now you're doing your own thing. So I'm assuming you took what you liked from him and then you kind of made some changes. So I'd like to hear how that changed over time.
Yeah, so when I started with Broz, I was working full-time. I did shift work. I worked in federal law enforcement, and so typically my schedule was 10 days on, 4 days off. So, and I worked crazy shifts. I could be working in the middle of the night. I could be working during the day. So I would train on days that I worked. I could only get into the gym once a day. So I would get in whenever I could. And then when I was off, and if it was a weekday, I would train twice a day. And I did that for probably like 2 years or so. And then I quit that job, and I currently work from home for a nutrition company working against gravity, and that created a lot of flexibility in my schedule. And then I started training twice a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, training most of the time, once the rest of the week, but some days I take some days off. And that was good. That got me to my first national medal And then after that, I started training once a day just because I don't really know. Like, I don't know. I was just kind of dealing, like some things were hurting. I wasn't making a ton of progress. And so we like kind of ramped it back. And then now I've started training double days, about 3 or 4 days a week, kind of depending. And I train 7 days a week most of the time. I think training every day for someone like me, I've been training now for, 5 or 6 years. I think I've like built up the ability to keep up with that. And I know what I have to do as far as body work to keep up with that. So it's working for now. I think like I'm 26, so I'm aware that I'm not old, obviously, but in weightlifting, I'm a little old, and I'm being careful to make sure that I am recovered when I show up.
Yeah,
for now, it's working.
That's interesting because you were asking me how old I was, and I said 25, and I think to myself, like, that's young for most people, but in weightlifting, I feel like I have a limited shelf life, and I need to kind of like push the gas a little bit more. And it's so strange how it kind of distorts your thought process on a lot of stuff, nutrition and training. So looking at also exercise selection, like I follow your training on Instagram, and you have a little bit of variation in there. So what was Bro's philosophy, and then what's your philosophy on exercise selection within like a training program?
Yeah, so I'm super influenced by Broz, and I think I hold true to a lot of the things that he taught me. I do things a little bit differently. Broz is just like, you do the traditional lifts, you front squat, back squat, and that's it. And we did a lot of power movements. He'll program a lot of power movements. But that was it. You weren't doing like complexes or anything like that. And we would seldom, and he never programmed for me to do anything off the blocks as far as snatching or clean and jerking, but we would jerk off the blocks. And I think that was great. And I actually think that that's a really great way for a beginner to learn how to lift, because you were doing the lifts a lot. Like when I trained with Broz, for the most part, my program was max total Monday, Wednesday, Friday, max power total Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday was typically a heavy back squat day. And then you would do squats and pulls like mixed in there through the week. And like, that's a fucking like really, really hard program. And it really wears you down. But I think as a beginner, it's really good because at that stage, your maxes are not maxes. Mm-hmm. And so like frequently like picking up those heavy weights is really good practice. And if you kind of like, Broz has this theory about, like to lift these weights, you have to lift the lighter weights so many times. So if you're like constantly touching those weights, you're getting those reps in faster and faster. And I believe that, especially for someone who's more like beginner intermediate and not able to hit like a true max. For me, at where I'm at, if I am going to max clean and jerk 3 times a week, like I'm going to die. Mm-hmm. It's not going to work out. So at this stage, it's just more about I'm focusing on weaknesses. Like right now, my back's weak. That's a big issue. So I'm doing a lot of like hang stuff. I do a lot of like snatch pull snatches is like my favorite exercise. I do the power movements pretty regularly to work on my pull and my upper body strength. And as far as like other exercises, I don't do much else than those movements, the traditional lifts and squats and pulls. I don't do a lot of like push presses. I don't do any type of kettlebell stuff or anything else. So in that regard, I've really stuck true to what Broz taught. But I do add complexes in there. I think having like being able to keep up cardiovascularly, I think there's an advantage to that. That was one thing that we didn't do enough of. I don't think I did enough like doubles and triples, so that at a meet, if I had to like take a clean and jerk back to back, I couldn't do it then, and now I can. And I think that's necessary. Like you are a weightlifter, and like sure, the like fat out of shape weightlifter thing is like kind of cool, but internationally, no one's like that. Like they're athletes. They show up like athletes. You need to look like an athlete. So
yeah. So a couple questions kind of come up for me. Like when you started, obviously Like, I tell beginners this all the time, like, you don't have one weakness, like, your entire body is a weak point, pretty much. But as you started identifying weaknesses, have they changed, or do you feel like your ratios have kind of stayed the same over time? You're just getting better, and those weaknesses are just kind of slowly creeping up along with your strengths?
No, I had like no legs. Like for the longest time, I would never miss a jerk. If I could clean it, I could jerk it. And we worked a long time to get my legs stronger. And I think my legs are still kind of an issue. My front squat's really good. My back squat sucks comparatively. And I like to say it's because I have small hips, but it's probably not true. But no, my back it was never an issue until probably the last year. I have a lot of trouble in the jerk. And I think like comparatively, my bottom half is just way, way stronger than my upper body.
Okay, so what are your best squats? Because I'm starting to feel like we're a similar lifter, because my front squat is like 4 kilos from my back squat. And my legs have always been a limiter, but if I can stand up, it's like the jerk is it's guaranteed, nearly.
My best front squat now is 130. My best back squat is 142, but I haven't done that in like 2 years.
Yeah. So what do your squats look like throughout the week?
Well, today I did 3 sets of 6, which was a lot. That sucked. But for the most part, it really varies, actually. I don't feel like I have anything that's set. I max squat a couple times a week, sometimes a couple times a day, depending how I'm feeling. But I mean, I'll do anything from sets. I will do some sets of 10 at lower weights and then up to like high intensity. My training does lean towards more intensity than volume, because I find volume is just really hard for me to recover from, and it's not worth the loss in day-to-day training. But it varies. I really couldn't. I would say most days working sets are going to be 15 reps or less. At probably like 85% higher.
Okay, so this is interesting here, because I think a lot of people have the idea that you need some sort of like rigid, structured program that has the next 12 weeks like completely written out. So what it sounds like is you have a template, you need to do these 3 lifts. So do you kind of just fill those in, or do you have like a training cycle, like 8 to 12 weeks, and you kind of just like change it or fluctuate it as it goes on?
No, I don't. I've never really done cycles. I just kind of the way that we approach it, my husband helps me with it a little bit, is like, so I'm going to compete at this time. And at this time, I want to open with this weight, with kind of the secondary thought being like, I want to finish with this, I want to take second, like planning my attempts. And then we just backtrack from there until, for me to open with a weight at a meet, I have to have made that lift 5 consecutive times without missing it multiple times leading up to that meet. And if I can't do that, then we reevaluate that opener and move it down. So that's how everything kind of starts. And at this stage, like we know I need to be like squatting this. I need to be able to power snatch. Like it's science at this point, because we know, how I lift. And we just work backwards from there and figure out how to get there. But I don't have a set. Nothing's written out in advance. It's written out a week in advance, and it's negotiable up until like every part of it's negotiable, because you don't know how you're going to feel. Like I kind of think when a coach writes a program 12 weeks out, I mean, maybe for a beginner or someone more intermediate, you can do that. I think for me, where I'm at, that's just unrealistic. Like I'm coming back from injury now, and so you don't know how that's going to go or how quickly things are going to come back, and like planning things out that far is probably not. I don't think that's the best way to coach someone personally.
Yeah, and when you say you have to make a lift 5 consecutive times, now is that 5 consecutive times without a miss, just leading up like the entire amount of time before the meet, or is that like one training session, 5 times, no misses?
That's one session. Like, if, for example, I opened with 85 at the American Open finals last year, and so I had made 85 in 2 sessions, 5 times with no misses. And so the idea behind that is like, I am so comfortable with 85. No matter how bad things are going, I'm not going to miss 85. Like, it's not going to happen. And so we've done that for 2 or 3 years now, and I haven't missed a snatch opener in a long time.
Okay, that's actually, I'm going to write that down and make sure I remember that, because that's gold. So have you had any like negative meet experiences so far where you just feel like you didn't perform well?
Yeah, I mean, I really sucked. When I started competing, I bombed out probably like at my first 3 or 4 national meets. And I was not very good at that point, and I missed a lot in training. I think that was one thing that I was allowed to do that I shouldn't have been allowed to do. It was always kind of like more. Like, it was always chasing a PR at every session, and like there was no consequence to missing. And so to a point, it got to the point where it was like, if you miss, you're done. Like, you are not allowed to miss. And so I made a point of being more consistent, and I'm speaking about the snatch specifically. I made a point to not miss, and that was a game changer. Like, now, I don't think I've missed a lift this week. Like, the only time I miss a lift or almost the only time I miss a lift now is like a max attempt or whatever, 100% for that day. I might miss that, and that'll be it. And if I miss 2 lifts consecutively, then the workout's done.
Yeah, so is that kind of like a rule of thumb you would give to most lifters? Do you feel that's appropriate, like across the spectrum?
Yeah, for sure. Even if you're, I would say 99% of the time that should be the rule. I think the last time that I missed a bunch, I was attempting, it was a PR in the snatch, like maybe a year ago, and I took 92 or 93. Like, I took it a bunch of times, way more than I should have. And I don't think you should do that, but sometimes you can make a lift after that. But once you start missing more than 3 times, you start doing stupid shit. Like, you're going to start swinging the bar, it's going to get out in front of you, you're going to get tired, or you're going to get hurt. Like, you're tired, this is 100%, or, 101, 102%, like, you shouldn't take it that many times.
So you talked about injuries before. Were those training related?
No. I've been injured twice, and once was because I fell off my bike, and the other time was because I fell down a flight of steps. So, really stupid.
Yeah, so how long did it take you to come back from those? And then, like, as far as training goes, how long did it take you to get back to training at the level where you were at before that?
So when I fell off my bike, that took a couple months, because I was told I fractured my shoulder, and it really hurt, and that took probably like 2 months. To get back to where I was, that took 2 or 3 months. This time, I fell down a flight of steps the day after Christmas this past Christmas, and I'm still like chasing to get back to where I was. I pretty much like stopped training for like 2 months. I would squat like maybe once or twice a week, but I was so frustrated and really felt like I was making it worse if I did anything on it. And I've been training full time now for about a month, maybe 6 weeks. And I'm 90%, 95, I guess.
Okay, so like looking back at all the time you spent training, the last 5 or 6 years, the injuries, the bad meets, what has kept you in the sport? Because it's like a long, grueling process to get stronger and get better at the snatch, clean, and jerk. I recently had on Travis Cooper, and he's been doing it for like 10 to 15 years. And what always intrigues me is how someone can stick with something so painful, so frustrating, so hard for so long. So if you have anything to say on that.
Yeah. Well, it was like really simple. I was considering taking a job, and it was going to interfere with training. And I probably was it was going to like shoot weightlifting. I was not going to be a good weightlifter if I took this job. And my husband was like, well, would you regret it? And like, would you ever look back and like wonder about it? And I was like, yeah, I definitely would. And like most of the time, those other things that you want to do in life, like whether it's a job or like have kids or whatever, like those things are not going anywhere. You can do them later. You don't need them now. But like weightlifting has a shelf life. Like, you're getting older. You're only going to be able to compete at a high level for so long. You're only going to be able to lift these big weights for so long. So like, if you're going to regret it, then don't walk away from it. But if you can walk away from it with total peace that you did everything you needed to do, like then that's different. But I'm not there yet.
So as far as your plans heading forward, are you going to train with a team or are you going to continue training by yourself? And how far do you think you can take, how far do you think you can go? I mean, like what's your honest opinion of what you're capable of?
I would love to train with a team. I live kind of like outside of Austin in the country a little bit. So, like traffic in Austin is terrible if you've ever been here. And there's no teams that are training during the day. Like most of the hours are at night. I really can't do like a tough training session at night. I'm just too, like I have to work. And so there's too much in my head for me to like try to snatch anything at night. So I have to train in the mornings, and so my house is the only option. But I would love if a great gym came to Austin and moved to the west side so that I could train with other people, because it's very hard to train by yourself day in and day out. It's very easy to get in your head, and it's tough. And then as far as like what I want to make a world team. I want to be one of the best girls in the country. Like that's what I want. What lifts it's going to take to get there. I think this year I probably need to do like 95, 115 to compete with the other girls. And this will also depend on how the weight classes shake out, and who I'm going to be competing against. And I don't think that any like self-respecting weightlifter can say they don't want to take attempts and make American records, even if you don't do it on the platform, like if you do it in training. So, I mean, I want to take swings at 101, 102, and take swings at, 126, 127. So.
Yeah. So do you have any idea what the weight classes plan to be? Have you heard anything?
No, I mean, I've seen like there's been that thing that was floating around on All Things Gym that I saw, but I have no insider knowledge if there's any truth to that or if it's total bullshit. I wish I knew. I mean, I think we've got like 2 weeks left, right? July 6th is the day, so soon.
Yeah. So kind of changing gears a little bit. You work with Working Against Gravity, and then you mentioned your previous employer before you kind of got into weightlifting. So like, what's your educational background, and then how has that switch happened? Because that's like pretty dramatic.
Yeah. So I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in cybersecurity, and so obviously that lends itself to federal law enforcement. And the way that the transition happened was I was working with Adi, who's the founder and CEO of Working Against Gravity. She was helping me with my nutrition. And through that, her and I became personal friends. And she knew that I was like very frustrated with my job. And at the time, my husband was competing at a high level in weightlifting. And so kind of the dream was that we were both going to train together, and I was not going to have to go to work and deal with this job every day. So Adi was like, hey, I need help over here. Like, I'll give you a job if you want to leave the bureau. And so I was like, yes, please. And so I left the bureau, and from there, I just ended up managing a lot of things at Working Against Gravity because Adi needed the help. And I am not qualified to be running a company or helping run a company, but, we're figuring it out, and things are going well. It's been 3 years now, I think. It will be 3 years. So she hasn't fired me yet.
Yeah. So what do you do with them? Are you like kind of behind the scenes? Are you an actual coach?
I do some coaching, but mostly I am our chief operations officer. So I handle like legal, financial, administrative stuff, operations. And I'm kind of like do some HR, a little bit of everything. At this stage, we're like a small company. Everyone kind of does everything. So yeah.
Okay. So you have like a limited amount of people you'll take on. Do you have any openings now?
Yeah, I am coaching a few people now. I'm increasing my client load now just because I kind of have the space for it.
Now, is that just nutrition or is that training as well?
It's just nutrition.
Okay. So if anyone's listening and wants to get some help with their nutrition, Taylor Mendes.
Yeah, I like working with weightlifters. I prefer weightlifters. I probably shouldn't say that, but I do. Weightlifters just have a special place in my heart.
Well, everyone's going to hear it now. This is going to go public, and everybody's going to know you for wanting to work specifically with weightlifters. So the kind of the moving away from average bros, like what spurred on that move to Austin?
Well, we moved to Philadelphia before that. I just didn't like Vegas. I grew up on the East Coast. Vegas is kind of a weird place to live, generally. And so I convinced my husband to move to Philly. And then we didn't love Philly either. And then Adi, the founder of Working Against Gravity, she lives here in Austin. And just as the company's growing, I felt like it was important that her and I are close. And so we were just like, yeah, let's go. There was really no thinking behind it. It was just like a little impulsive.
Yeah, that's kind of what you find with like high level weightlifters though. It's like once they want to do something, they pull the trigger. I mean, regardless of how smart of an idea it may sound at the time, there's just that commitment that's kind of different. I think what separates like people that are really, really successful from people that aren't.
Yeah. Fortunately, my husband's the same way. We don't let fear like overtake us. We'll figure it out. Like, how hard can it be?
Right.
We're not moving to like Brazil. It's just Austin.
Yeah. So were you dating Pat when he went to train with Brazil? Like Team Brazil? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of interested, like, how did that whole relationship start? I mean, you guys were training in the same gym, but any like details that are kind of stand out?
It started because, well, Pat, I don't know if you've met Pat, he's like kind of awkward, especially with girls. He's kind of quiet. And so when I met Pat, I was attracted to him, but I thought he was gay because
oh goodness,
he wouldn't like talk to me at all. And so it became like this challenge. I was like, I'm going to get this guy and like find out if he's gay. And, to my ignorance, I had told Broz about my plan. And so like Pat was aware of what I was doing and was like making it difficult. And Pat was really mean to me in the gym. He like talked shit on my lifting. He made me cry one day, like ugly crying, because at the time I was missing like 45 kilos, and he was just like relentless. And then I showed up like hammered at a party, and one thing led to another, and that was almost 5 years ago. We're married now, so.
Yeah, so does he still, I mean, obviously he's not training competitively anymore, but do you guys still kind of train together at times?
Yeah, he mostly just watches me. He doesn't, Pat is banned. He tested positive twice. And so he's got a sour taste in his mouth, I would say. Like it hurts him that he can't compete. And so he'll lift sometimes when he's in the mood, but for the most part, he just watches me and helps me. He's got a great eye for technique in the snatch. So like anytime I'm snatching, I'd prefer that he'd watch and help.
Yeah.
So that's his role.
So not to like, I don't want to like create any tension, but like when you see Pat get popped, and obviously you're a clean lifter, is there like some sort of like weird feeling there? Because obviously you want to compete against clean athletes and make it a fair playing field.
No, this is going to be very controversial. But I think like if we're being like super honest, it's clear weightlifting is not a clean sport. All the positive tests that came out in the past couple of years, it's clear that those at the top are not clean. And when Pat was competing, he didn't want to be U.S. national champion. Like, he didn't care about that. That was not the goal. His goal was to compete against Dillian, you know? And so for him, like, to compete against Dillian, you don't do that clean. And so he was playing a different game. Like, and the rest of us are not playing that game. And so that's where he was coming from. And like, is he a cheater? Yes. Like, you're not supposed to take drugs. Like, did I feel bad for him when he like tested positive? Of course I felt bad for the pain that he was going through, because he put his entire life behind this dream to go to Rio. But I didn't feel bad for him because, like, you did it. You broke the rules and you got caught. So it's a little more, I think people really dumb down drugs to, like, they're these evil people who are cheaters, and it's just not that simple. Like, not in weightlifting. When you're trying to compete on the international level, like, Pat wanted to be as strong as he could. Like, he wanted to be the best. He wanted to break world records. And regardless of what you believe, you know, I don't believe that you're breaking world records clean.
No, I agree completely. And it's just the reality of it. And I mean, you even hear about international lifters like coming out in the open and talking about it. And like, I remember there's a quote that kind of sticks out to me. And then granted, it was back like in the 60s, but the guy was saying that the only difference between him and the current world champion was their drug bill. And sometimes that's just the reality of it. It's rampant in the NFL. It's rampant in other sports. So, I mean, what do you propose? Like, do you have this idea of what it should be, or what you would like to see with testing, or do you just kind of like accept it for the way that it is and you just make it as far as you can?
I mean, for me personally, I don't care if people are taking drugs internationally, because you know, I started lifting when I was 22. Like, I'm not going to break a world record. I'm not going to be world champion, and I am okay with that. So I don't feel like I'm even competing against those girls. In the States, like here in the US though, I want it to be clean, and I think that it is. I've been drug tested plenty of times. And I know everyone is drug tested plenty of times. All those records are open. You can go to USADA's website and see everything. So I spend no time thinking about drugs outside of, you know, when someone accuses me of drugs or when someone talks shit on my husband. It's not something I worry about. I think people being really, I don't know, this is probably an unpopular belief or an unpopular stance. I think like maybe if I'd been lifting since I was 5 and I actually felt like I was, you know, I had a chance, I'd feel differently about drug use. But for me personally, it doesn't affect my life, or I don't stress about it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to thank you for just kind of being so open and honest about it, like, and just kind of accepting the questions, because I had no intention of like even getting off into this, but it was kind of the natural flow of the conversation.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And I mean, obviously, I'm married to Pat. I love Pat, obviously. And so I kind of like people to understand, like, where his head's at. Because I have seen a lot of shit about him on the internet. And, sometimes I'm the victim of it, too, if people don't think that I'm clean. So it's kind of, like, nice to say it to more than just, like, the gym. Because people have heard me say this before. I just think people don't know why people take drugs. They don't understand it. And I think if people were more educated, they might think about it a little bit differently.
Right. And seeing like how, at what level these guys are at that are doing drugs, and like, you have to be a genetic freak in the first place and have like this incredible amount of talent and ability and everything catered around the sport. So it kind of switching gears a little bit. I have a couple questions I ask most people that come on to kind of lighten the mood.
Sure.
So for aspiring weightlifters, maybe people like right on the cusp of qualifying for nationals, or someone who just qualified, what's some advice you would give them to help take them to the next level?
I I would say it gets your mind straight. Like you should spend a lot of time visualizing, thinking about your training sessions, especially your heavy sessions. And, like I would go as far as I decide what I'm going, like if I'm going to total, especially if I'm heading into a meet, I decide what I'm going to wear the day before down to like sports bra and socks. I decide how I'm going to load the bar. And then when I get there, I don't bullshit with everyone in the gym. Like, you're there to do a job. You need to focus. I get all of my plates out before I even start totaling, so I don't have to, like, if you're rummaging around for your plate somewhere else, like, it's a distraction. And you need to focus. Like, you need to put all of your mental energy into your total. Because that makes a huge difference. Like, even if you're just, if the difference is 1 kilo in your total every time because you're focusing a little bit more, that's going to add up over time. That's significant progress. And you're not going to get that if you're not focused, not thinking about it, and just like bullshitting at the gym. And put your fucking phone down. That's the biggest thing, actually. I take love. Put your fucking phone down. There's nothing that I hate more than being at the gym and watching someone texting between sets. That's what I hate that. You're not focused. You're not trying that hard if you're texting or just like surfing on Instagram.
Right. That's actually really interesting. So that kind of makes me want to hear like what a typical day for you looks like when you have heavy sessions, because obviously you're prioritizing rest, you're prioritizing nutrition. I'm curious if you have any like not like meditation, but any like mental relaxation, anything you do to kind of help with that, or like just what does your day look like when you're training very hard?
I try to get up at the same time every day. Sometimes if I'm really tired, I'll sleep a little bit later just because, and I can tell the difference between, I'm kind of tired or like I really need to sleep more. I get up, I eat, I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I listen to podcasts and then I, digest, drink my coffee, and then I train for my first session and stretch and whatever, kind of like it's the same routine of just stretching and moving around. And then after my first training session, I'll work. Typically, it'll vary how much I need to work. And then before I train again, I'll relax. I will try to sleep sometimes. It can be hard for me to nap, like actually fall asleep in the middle of the day. But typically I just like lay down, be quiet, think about what I'm going to do, and then train again. And then I try to be done with work at 6. And then after 6, I'm either just kind of like doing something to recover, like stretching, Normatec, cupping or something like that. And then I read, or I also knit. So I'll knit. I find that relaxing. But it's just a lot of like quiet, like not going out, not being busy, just like being calm. And then I spend probably like before bed, I end up like just laying there and thinking about the next day's training, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to move, visualize, like if there's a heavy attempt the next day, like visualizing how that's going to go, I think about my focal point when I'm lifting, just like try to put myself there, because there's been studies that show that like that's like the brain experiencing those things. So I think visualization is really valuable.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of an Ivan Abajev quote. I remember he was saying something about his athletes being on Facebook while they're between training sessions or being on the computer or YouTube. And he's like, that's not resting, right? Resting is like completely getting rid of all of the stimulation to just kind of quiet the mind and quiet down. So podcasts that you're interested in, or like books that you would read, what are some resources that you could kind of give to our listeners to check out?
Oh, my podcasts and stuff are not going to help anybody. I mean, I work for the government, so I listen to a ton of like political podcasts. And I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts because I work for the government. I work for law enforcement. So like that's my interest. And I don't think that's going to help anyone lift anything. And then as far as reading, I read, a lot of stuff that's not going to help anybody lift either. Like right now I'm reading The Alchemist.
Okay. Yeah, I've read that.
Yeah. And The Pursuit of Happiness. I read a fiction and a nonfiction book like simultaneously, depending on my mood. So, most of that stuff is just total rest. There's no agenda with that stuff besides like pleasure. I think it's important to like, you can't be intense all the time. Like, you can't be like all about weightlifting all the time, because I've done that and it does not help me. So I try to do things to just relax me and make me happy. So that's kind of where that kind of stuff comes in, with reading and podcasts and knitting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So like these last few questions are kind of like the philosophical part of the podcast. They're a little more abstract. So however you want to answer these, it's up to you. They kind of get away from weightlifting a little bit. So besides like the physical improvements of weightlifting, so like building muscle, getting stronger, do you think it would be useful for people to resistance train or weightlift? And what has picking up the sport done for you?
It's given me a lot of confidence. Before I started weightlifting, I wouldn't say I was not a confident person, but I wasn't like confident in myself in the way that I am now. And it's hard to really like put into words, to really like describe that difference. But like when I was in college, I would go to the gym sometimes to just like be active, but I would feel so uncomfortable and feel like I didn't belong there. And, now I feel like I can go into any gym and make fun of like every guy in the gym because I'm stronger than them. So it's been an overall confidence and learning to move your body in different ways and kind of like use your body. I don't know. I feel like this answer is going downhill quickly.
No, like it actually makes a lot of sense. Like that, speaking on that whole confidence thing, like I personally, for me, before I started weightlifting and strength training, like I used to kind of be a little more shy and timid and keep my thoughts to myself. But now I'm kind of just like, whatever. I talk shit to so many people. And like someone will just walk in the room and I just instantly want to start like kind of the same thing you said, just like talking shit to them and have like fun, casual conversation. But before that, it just seemed like there's this weird barrier. And I don't know what that was. I don't know if that's just growing up and maturing or if it was like actually weightlifting.
Yeah. It could be just being a grown up now and not being a kid. It's true.
Yeah. So the next question, what is the worst mistake you've made as an athlete?
Oh, worst mistake I've made as an athlete. I think that when I started lifting, my husband is he was an exceptional weightlifter. And you Google Pat Mendes and you find the real Pat Mendes and you find all these videos of him just being amazing. And when I showed up at meets, especially my first few meets, I was so embarrassed about what I was lifting and how bad my technique was and like how many lifts I missed. I mean, my first meet, I missed every lift in the back. I missed a 35 kilo snatch in the back. I did not make a single snatch that day because I was so nervous because I felt like I was embarrassing him and like I was like not worthy of being there, I guess. And that was dumb. Like it was so silly to like have this mentality that if I was not going to win the meet, then I shouldn't be there because it cost me a lot of heartache and a lot of bomb outs and a lot of embarrassment when it was really silly.
So what's your advice to someone who's just starting out as a beginner and you see all of these great weightlifters on YouTube and Instagram and because I hear it from girls and guys too, they just talk about how bad they are and how much they suck and weightlifting is such a slow progressing sport where you're not going to put like 40 kilos on your total in a couple months. Unless you're a complete beginner and your technique's not going to really develop, for at least a few years. So what do you say to someone who's just starting out and kind of dealing with that same problem?
I would say for anybody at any level, what anyone else is doing has nothing to do with you. What I'm lifting has nothing to do with you. What, the girls that I have to compete with, what they're lifting has nothing to do with me. At any stage in the game, it has nothing to do with me. And I can't affect their training any more than they can affect my training. And if you find that you're really struggling with that, like noise in your head, like delete your Instagram. You don't need to be on Instagram. Like if weightlifting is important to you and that's really taking a toll on your mental health and your ability to show up in your training and feel good about what you're doing, then you need to get off of Instagram, because I mean, I've done that. I will delete my Instagram sometimes, especially going into a meet, because it gets in everyone's head, because you start watching what everyone else is doing. You tell yourself a story about what kind of shape they're in and what they're going to lift, and it's not helping you. I think one thing that I think helps with all of that is, instead of looking at how far you have to go, look at how far you've come. And like, that's the gain. Like, the gain that you've made, stay in that space, because that's a real space. That's like tangible space. This, like, where you want to go is an ideal that you may or may not ever reach. And it'll be really disheartening to always stay forward and looking at that, however big that goal might be. And I think it's really important to stay positive about your own training and your own progress, and not tell yourself a story about what everyone else is doing, because it has nothing to do with you. Literally nothing. Turn it off.
That's great. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to listen to this, and I don't know. I feel like if you can't delete your Instagram, or not, like, be out in the weightlifting world and still train hard, like, if you can't train hard without your Instagram because you want to post your lifts or whatever, I think you need to reevaluate what you want out of weightlifting.
Yes. If you're lifting for Instagram, I mean, you can make a lot of money on the internet. I mean, I work for an internet business. Like, I know all about it. You can make a lot of money. And if that's why you're lifting, that's fine. But if you're lifting to, like, win national medals, make world teams, like, you want to go to the Olympics, then you should be able to turn your Instagram off.
Yeah.
Like, and if you can't, you're not actually lifting to make a world team, make the Olympics. You're lifting for Instagram.
Right. I completely agree. And I guess before we hop on to the last question, so I kind of talked about your negative competition experiences earlier in the podcast. So what are, like, your best or your greatest achievements in weightlifting? Do you have any particular moments that stick out?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind was 2016 nationals. It was my first national medal, and so going into the meet, I knew I had a chance at medaling, and I knew I needed to snatch 86, and so that was like, I knew I wasn't going to medal in total or clean and jerk, but I knew I had a shot at snatch. And so we're in there getting warmed up. Everything feels good. And then Pat gets kicked out of the back room. And it's because he's banned athlete at that time. It's totally illegitimate. It's like, he shouldn't have been back there. Those are the rules. We just didn't know. But I didn't have anyone else. So it was me and my friend Adi, and I'm crying. And I need to be warming up, and she's freaking out, and we're trying to find someone else to be back there. And so we finally get someone else, Billy Bybee, who's also a weightlifter. He came back to help me. Like, thank God, because Adi couldn't count cars to save her life. And so Adi's just trying to keep me calm, and I'm warming up. And at this point, I have like 5 minutes to go from, like, the bar to my opener. So I'm just, like, going, and I miss 70, like, terribly. I missed 75. I missed 77, and I'm opening at 81. Like, it looked horrible. And Adi's like, you know what? Let's just do pulls. You know, you look great. Like, you should just do pulls. And, like, I knew that I looked terrible. I had just been crying and, like, freaking out. And then somehow, like, I went out there. I made 81. And then came back, did some pulls, went out there, made 84. Came back, did some pulls, made 86. Like, I went 3 for 3, and I got a medal, and I couldn't believe it. But that just goes to show, like, the day of the meet, all the work is done. Like, I had done all the work. I had made all the lifts and training, and so, like, all that noise that was happening those, like, 20 minutes before the lift, it really didn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my proudest moment.
That's a great story. I guess that just kind of goes to show, like, your warm-ups don't mean too much in a competition setting. So, because I've heard that plenty of times, like, people will miss like 20 kilos below their opener, go out and just absolutely crush it. So I think it's important to remember it's a skill sport, and if you can just kind of find that groove, you're going to make lifts.
Yeah.
So the last question, and this is kind of like the one I ask everyone. It's like the big question. So what is one thing that people can do each day to better their life?
One day to better their life.
Yeah. So this can be anything at all.
I wasn't prepared for this kind of question.
Yeah, we're going deep.
Yeah, I should have known. I had thought all about, like, weightlifting in my history, but I hadn't thought about, like, one thing to better your life, I think like just celebrating your own successes, like whatever those are. I think that one thing I read that really stuck with me is because I can be pretty hard on myself, and I used to think that was like productive. That was like me being driven and motivated and like having big goals. But really, when you're hard on yourself, you're just not taking accountability for your own success. So I think taking accountability for your own success is really meaningful. I think it's meaningful both like day to day, whether at work or like, just going about life or in the gym. Like when you do something good or someone gives you a compliment, accept it. Like don't deflect it. Like take accountability for your own success. And I think that just kind of like snowballs into positivity and like happiness. And that matters in the grand scheme of achieving those big goals and those other things that you want to do.
That's great. I think in a society where we're always trying to do more and push it, we never take time to reflect and consider our own achievements because we're always looking at other people's and what's possible. So it's phenomenal. And you came through in the clutch like a great weightlifter would.
I was sitting there for a good like 7 seconds. Like, fuck, I got nothing. Drink a gallon of water.
I think I've heard someone say like make your bed. I think that's about as simplistic as it gets, but like you can find meaning in anything. I think as long as you can kind of come away with something positive. But Taylor, I want to thank you for coming on, and contact information if people want to work with you or get in touch or watch your Instagram videos.
Instagram's the best. I'm just Mrs. Buff Mendes, and Mendes with an S.
Yeah, and she's really responsive. I mean, I contacted you about this, and it was a super quick conversation. So I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast, and I want to thank everyone for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please like, share, subscribe. Go check out our sponsor, Bar Shield. Purchase their products, and you'll get 10% off with the discount code PWPodcast. Thanks again, guys, and we'll catch you on the next episode.